Hello and welcome to another video in the series Chess Guide to Win. In this video I will be going over the relative values of the pieces in a pretty basic way to give you a general idea of how you should evaluate a board situation and determine if you want to make certain trades, what kinds of moves you might want to make, and maybe look to see who you think is winning in a specific situation. I'm not going to get into too technical a description of these. I'm just going to keep it at the basic level. In some of the later videos I will go over positional concepts and other things that impact the values of the pieces that can make them either more or less valuable than these basic numbers that I'm going to give you. But I'm going to go ahead and start. I've got the pieces lined up here from pawn to king in terms of which one's more valuable. And generally, players will say that a pawn is going to be worth 1 point. And again, these point values are rules of thumb. They're not really going to have any impact aside from helping you evaluate positions. So you don't get any extra points or anything from having more pieces at the end of a game or not. It's really going to come down to who can checkmate or stalemate or draw or get the opponent to resign and stuff like that. So past that, the point system is really just for your own benefit, not really for winning. But anyway, the pawn is going to be considered 1 point generally. The knight will be considered 3 points. The bishop will also be considered 3 points, and then the rook is going to be 5 points, and the queen is 9 points. And the king is not generally considered to have a value, though obviously he is very important, and as if you get checkmated you lose, the value should be very high in terms of protecting the king. In terms of his attacking abilities, later in the game he can become fairly useful as an attacking sort of active piece, but maybe arguably like 3 or 4 points, I think I've seen some people say, but generally the king isn't really given a value, as you can't trade off the king. And again, there's many factors that come into play in terms of valuing the pieces past these basic numbers. A pawn that's very far advanced, close to promoting, becomes much more sort of impactful than 1 point generally. So that's one thing. If you have a pair of bishops, a lot of times people will say that is more valuable than like a bishop and a knight, especially when it gets to the end game. And if you play a lot of games, you will probably see and understand why that is. The main thing is 2 bishops. One bishop has the restriction of being stuck on a single colored square or colored squares. Whereas if you have both bishops, you're not restricted to that, and the bishops can their range of motion is they can get all the way across the board in a single move. So they can sort of both protect, maybe they can protect your king in some circumstances, but also sort of control a promotion square or defend pieces along a diagonal. Whereas if a knight was sort of stuck in a sort of defensive position by this king, the squares that this knight would be threatening are not, they're obviously shorter distance from the knight, so it can't, for instance, protect any of the promotion squares from this position, whereas the bishop obviously could, which makes the bishop pretty versatile. The knight's going to be a little bit stronger, in more centralized locations. I mean, most pieces are going to be pretty strong in the center, but if the knight's on the edge of the board, sort of half of his moves are not available to him. So he's got about half the you know, the normal amount of moves that he can take being on the edge of the board. So that's, you know, pretty bad. Same with the corner. You know, he's going to be very restricted in a corner. But, you know, those are some positional things and a little bit more subtle, maybe more advanced points that I will go over in future videos after, you know, you've been exposed to some of the tactic videos and other strategy videos. You might have a better understanding of why these things are going to impact whether, you know, whether this knight is worth, you know, 3 points or less or more based on, you know, the board position. So, and that's going to apply to pretty much all the pieces. Their value is going to be relative to where they are on the board, what the rest of the board looks like, and, you know, how many pieces are on the board. Because in the late game, while the pawns are only worth 1 point, if it comes down to a late game where you've only got, you know, 1 extra pawn on the opponent, it can be said that you've got a 1 point advantage, which doesn't sound like much, but if let's just say you know, let's just say that the position is something like this. Well, now, you know, it looks like, okay, white's only got 1 point, but this position, you know, 1 point in the early game or in the mid game is not really going to generally be all that decisive. I mean, obviously it is 1 point is 1 point, but you know, in a late game scenario where your opponent only has 1 pawn and 1 king, you having 2 pawns, especially positioned like this, that's gonna be decisive. As long as the white, as long as the player playing the white pieces is making accurate moves, this is going to be a win for white, and it's not even going to take very much sort of thought to pull this off, because the threat of this pawn promoting, you know, is a serious threat, and you know, depending on whose move it is, might determine who is going to win this game. You know, so if it's black's move, he can start moving towards the promotion square, and he can get there if it's his move. But if it's not his move, obviously he wouldn't be able to get there. You know, if white gets to go first, he's going to get there before black can defend the square. So, you know, that is, you know, all these things are factors. Now, whose move it is could make all the difference, you know, in how valuable this pawn is, or, you know, what square it's on. You know, if it's on this square at the 4th rank, it's on this square at the 3rd rank. You know, that makes a big difference in terms of what white can really do. And again, you know, other things that could make the difference is, you know, if black has a let's say black has another pawn, you know, right here, that's going to make a pretty big difference in terms of how the game is going to proceed. Same if he's got a pawn here, you know, white could have, you know, all kinds of pawns. You know, we could keep it even 3 and 3, but, you know, depending on the position. So again, all these factors are sort of subtle points, and the relative point value is not always going to be very illuminating or sort of accurate to evaluate a position. And again, once you go through the strategy videos and the tactic videos and everything, the positional videos, you should have a good understanding of the factors that go into you know, adjusting these point values, and have a better understanding of looking at positions, and sort of understanding which side has maybe a material advantage, or, you know, or a positional advantage, which can be sort of measured in a score system as well. And that's sort of how the computer chess programs sort of operate. They work off of, you know, numbers and scoring systems and stuff like that. So, but again, that's sort of a technical point, not exactly all that important here. So anyway, this is going to be the end of this video. Hopefully you found it informative. If you have any questions about the relative point values of the pieces, feel free to shoot me a message. Again, as you play, you will probably sort of come to your own sort of opinion on the pieces and how they should be weighted and valued and such. But again, this is a pretty good starting point for players who are just starting out. When trying to think about whether you want to trade pieces, a lot of times if you get a chance to trade a bishop for a rook, for example, or a bishop, a knight, or even a rook for a queen, these are frequently trades that you will want to do. But again, it does depend on the specifics of the situation. Sometimes your bishop and your knight might be more effective as attackers rather than just trading them off. There are certain situations where trading pieces is bad, even if it's a material advantage. It could leave you in a situation where you are losing in other ways. So it's not always good to just trade off pieces based on this point system. But if you do trade off pieces just based on the point system, a lot of times it will work itself out. Especially some of the more extreme situations where you trade a bishop or a knight for a queen, or even a rook for a queen. A lot of times that's with accurate play that will sort of you will be able to notice why that is a good trade, and generally you will have good chances to win games where you get trades like that. So anyway, this is going to be the end of the video, and take care.